Do you remember the very first knife that got you into knife collecting? Not the first knife that you ever had, but the first knife that really got you going down the rabbit hole. How's it going, everybody? I'm Rollshambo, the connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny. And if you know the kind of knife that I'm talking about, make sure that you list it down in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, show the like button some love. Today, it's time that we talk about ranking the Bestech Lockness, designed by Cohenscraft and manufactured by Bestech. You know, the irony behind this knife is that this knife was not originally the one that I requested, but because it was released at the same time as this one, they sent it along for me to check it out. Shout out to Eric Outer of Outer Limitless, also the US Bestech rep, who has given me so many knives to check out. No, I do not get to keep these. These are being sent back very soon. But they do give me the opportunity to talk about a lot of knives that I wouldn't have the opportunity to otherwise. And that's pretty dang cool. In the interest of full disclosure, it doesn't affect the kind of score that I give it, because when I look at ranking a knife like this Bestech Lockness, which costs $314, first and foremost in my thoughts is, what if I was on the other end? If I was the person looking at buying this knife, what does that person deserve? I'll tell you, they deserve context. And that's what we're doing today. We're going to rank this because, ironically, when I saw pictures of this after its release, it wasn't a knife that I was interested in. I did what most people have probably done, and that is see micarta at $314. And in some cases, G10. That's right, they make some of these with G10. Since then, my opinion has changed dramatically. And today, we're going to go over why. You see, I've had the opportunity to hold it, to carry it, to fidget with it, to answer the questions that you care about. And now that I have, the only question left to answer is the Bestech Lockness a grail, or is it garbage? All right, guys, so let's go ahead and talk about the Bestech Lockness. Lockness. Okay. And before we do, in case you haven't seen Grail or garbage before, here's how it works. It's a ranking system. Categorically, we rank these knives. And we've got 5 categories that consist of materials, ergonomics, Fidget Factor, the lock, and then of course, fit and finish to round it all out. At the end, we will add up all the scores. Each category is worth a max of 10 points. And then we will place it on our leaderboard where it will forever be known and shadowed in infamy, because that's just how it works. All right, and so the first category is materials. Now, materials is heavily weighed against its cost. That's kind of how we come up with a value proposition, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if it has the most amazing materials in the world if it also costs $1 million. Now, thankfully, while knives can get expensive, I haven't heard of any that cost that much, at least not in my neck of the woods. So let's talk about the cost. This comes in at $314, give or take. I know we just went through Black Friday, so if you managed to get one of these for less than $314, good on you. I can tell you right now, it's actually a pretty darn good deal. So, what are the materials, you might ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. As you can tell here, we have a titanium frame lock, titanium pocket clip, titanium backspacer, which is, honestly, if they didn't have this backspacer there, I'd be quite upset. Then, of course, you get these micarta overlays for the handle that go over the titanium frame, and then M390. And it's a lot of M390. This is a big blade. This knife is not a small knife, but it's also not necessarily as heavy as you might expect. The funny thing is that this knife actually was one where I looked at the price tag and I thought initially, But why? Because all I could see at the time was this front, and I said, micarta, you know, I like micarta, but it's not what I would consider a super premium material. It's not
going to be, you know, carbon fiber and it's not titanium. But then you flip it over here and you see the titanium pocket clip and you see the titanium frame lock with the steel lock bar insert and over travel stop. And that's when you start to realize this is indeed a titanium frame lock, but they put a handle material that's more user friendly on the outside. You see, the beautiful thing about micarta is that it's going to patina over time naturally, much like brass or copper would, and that's cool. It's also much easier to grip onto. It has a natural grippiness that you don't necessarily get with titanium. Titanium looks beautiful and it's very, very good at being corrosion resistant, but it's also slicker. It's harder to hold on to. They get snail trails over time, and you know, it just doesn't patina as well with age. And so the more I think about it, it's like, you know what, you don't really lose out here because you still get titanium frame, you still get M390, which is a, you know, widely considered a super steel, and then of course you also get micarta. That's great because it actually encourages you to use this, not just baby it, and that's pretty cool. You know, you can feel good carrying this knife. The irony is that when I asked for these knives to be sent to me initially, I asked for the Bestech Skirmish. Now the Bestech Skirmish was the one that I thought for sure was going to be the one, and ironically, after having both of these in my possession, the one that got carried more was the Lockness, the one that I thought for sure was overpriced. I don't necessarily think that anymore. I think that for everything you get, it's a pretty good value, and for that reason, it's going to get an 8 out of 10 for materials. Now the second category is ergonomics, and this is one where a lot of bigger knives can go wrong, because if you have too much real estate, sometimes your hand can feel a little bit lost when you grip a knife, and in this case that's not the case. The ergonomics is all about how comfortable it is to hold, how versatile it is in the grip, and it doesn't really matter if you reverse up the grip, but this is going to be very, very good for skinning, and because of that tip, you could actually do a fair bit of stabbing with it too if you wanted to, and the grip actually really helps with that. The fact that we have micarta handle scales actually helps the ergonomics because it creates some natural texturing that doesn't feel obtrusive. Furthermore, the clip is very well done. I'm a big fan of this style because it's wide enough to get a nice purchase in your pocket, and it's deep carry enough where you're not going to have a whole lot sticking out. It makes it pretty darn carry friendly. The fact that you have the titanium sticking out here helps as well because it's a smooth part for the meat of your fingers to go ahead and grip onto. That's nice. When we talk about the jimping, and yes, it has jimping. I know I've done a couple of videos lately where I've harped on the jimping or lack thereof, and in this case, that's not a problem. You see, the jimping is there, but it's knocked down, and it's deep enough where you actually do get a nice positive purchase. Now, there is no finger cutout on here, but there is a sharpening choil. I still wouldn't suggest putting your finger there, but you can actually move up pretty far, and your thumb can go as far as the apex of the spine, meaning that you get total purchase. I can definitely see someone skinning an animal with this knife, and that's cool. It means that the knife has purpose. I really, really enjoy that. The ergonomics on here are definitely great. They're not, oh my god, hand meltingly good, but I would also say that they're better than average, and you know, for that reason, I actually think that they're even a little bit better than average, and that's why it's going to be getting an 8 out of 10 for ergonomics. The rambling doesn't stop there. The next category is Fidget Factor, and Fidget Factor is about a couple different things really. It's about the detent, it's about the pivot mechanism, and it's also a bit about the lock. You see, fidgeting is how much do you want to play with the knife. It's not necessarily about how many deployment options you have, although that plays a role as well. So let's talk about those deployment options. First and foremost, you get this fuller right here, and that fuller is pretty decent. It allows for much meatier fingers or much smaller fingers, and it gives you the option to decide where you want to flick it out from. And you know what, if fuller flicking isn't your thing, then you also have these thumb studs, and those thumb studs do work quite well. In fact, I would actually venture to say that it works a little bit better than fuller flicking, at least in the traditional sense. That fuller is on both sides, and I mention that because some knives are not like that. Some knives do not have the fuller on both sides. This one does. Let's talk about the action. The action is running on bearings. Now, the bearings aren't super glassy, and that's okay. It doesn't need to be because The weight of the blade is enough to get this to drop shut with just a little bit of encouragement. It's not a guillotine by any stretch of the imagination, but it's definitely not going to be something that you have to think about. You don't necessarily want your finger to be in the path of travel for that blade, but if it is, you do have time to get it out of the way because, again, a little bit of encouragement goes a long way. So with that being said, the lock comes into play because how comfortable the lock is to disengage plays a role in how long you can fidget with this thing for. And here's the deal. A lot of you out there have mentioned over the months that I've been doing this that, fidget isn't everything. We shouldn't buy knives just to play with them. Like, what are we, children? And, the answer to that is maybe. But at the end of the day, the fidgeting is important because the more you handle a knife and the more comfortable you feel with it, the more dexterity you gain and the more control over the blade that you have. I think that everyone should fidget with their knives at least a little bit to become more familiar with it. The better grasp you have on how a knife works, its balance and all of that, the more useful it's going to be in your hand. It's not the knife, it's the wielder. And so, yeah, fidget with your knives every day. I said what I said. Getting back on track, fidgeting with the knife is fun. It's not the most amazing thing ever, but it is definitely fun. And I found myself enjoying playing with it, most notably because of the balance. And that's not something that I talk about nearly enough when I talk about Fidget Factor. The balance on here is really, really good. You can do your flips and your spins, and that's something that rather impressed me. If I notice the balance on a knife, it means that it's either really good or really bad. And in this case, it's really good. And so for those reasons, it's not the most amazing fidget knife out there, but it's also not necessarily bad or even better than average. It's, again, better than average, which means that it's going to be getting an 8 out of 10. Now let's talk about the lock. And some of you might be thinking that you know where I'm headed with this because you're going to say, well, the lock is exposed titanium coming out from that micarta. That looks fantastic. He's going to give it a lot. He's going to give it an amazing score, right? Well, not necessarily. Let's talk about this lock. The lockup itself is good. There's no blade play left or right, up and down. There's no double clutch on here. There's no extra spot where that pivot's going to latch in. And that's nice. As far as the lockup from the lock bar, I would say that that's about 23 to 24%. Yeah, it's decent. It's not amazing, but it's enough to get the job done. And for those tasks that I mentioned where you're going to be getting up and close and choking up to make sure that you have ultimate control, it's going to be doing just fine, but it's nothing special. And that's something that I have to mention is that they could have made this more comfortable, and it is a little chamfered out there on the inside, but while it's not super uncomfortable, it's also not super comfortable. I would have actually liked to have seen this to be crowned a little bit or have this inner edge scalloped out. It's fine that it's not, and it's not something that would keep me from buying this knife, like an oh my gosh before you buy type of thing, but it's also not something that really stands out. The lock bar relief is there. I think that little bit of relief actually takes away from the aesthetic, and I kind of wish that they had found a way to reverse that so that was on the underside rather than the top side. I have seen it done before. I know it's not something that's easy to do. It's just something that I kind of wish they had done for an aesthetic part. The lockup is good. It's not special. It's not amazing. It's going to be getting a 7 out of 10 for the lock. So we've gone through 4 categories, and the 5th is fit and finish. And if it's not Fidget Factor, fit and finish would be my favorite as far as categories. This is where we talk about the design language. How well executed was it? Was it manufactured to spec? Do I feel like the manufacturer missed anything or could have improved on anything inside this design language? Well, when we talk about this is a design. This is a Cohen's Craft design. Morgan Cohen's designed this knife, and he's kind of an outlier as a designer. We don't necessarily see a whole lot of knives from him, but he's actually coming out with more and more designs. And at first glance, it's really easy to look at this and say, well, that's an odd shaped blade. I wonder why they did that, and then move on to something else that's plain and boring. But you know me, I tend to like things that stand out. I like the fact that there's a swedge at the top of this blade spine. I like the fact that we have a fuller on both sides that makes sense and is more than just a circle or just an oval. It's oblong and bean shaped, and that's neat. I love the fact that they took a risk, because you can't get a full titanium version of this. It's going to be no matter which one you get, it's going to be titanium, but it's going to be titanium in micarta or titanium in G10. And then to price it at $300+ is a little bit ballsy. Now, I know that the materials are there to support the price, and based on what I've felt so far, I think that the manufacturing supports it as well. However, we are animals that think with our minds and our eyes first, and so when you see this online, I can't help but wonder how many people are passing this up because they see, oh, I like micarta, but ooh, $300, that's tough. Or ooh, G10, $300, no thank you. And then they forget that, hey, it's also titanium. You also get these beautiful features. This backspacer is well thought out because you've got a lot of blade here, okay? There's a lot of blade there, and if this is in your pocket, that blade is something that you don't want getting damaged, especially if this is a user, which I actually think that it was intended to be. So many knives these days are just meant to be good fidget knives, good for EDC photos, and then, you know, forever locked and forgotten away in your glove compartment or in your display case. And this is a subtle reminder that it's okay to take these things out and actually use them as tools. I'm not part of the use your knife police. You buy a knife, do what you want with it. But I do like the encouragement, however subtle it may be, from the designer to actually use this and not be afraid of that. And I think that that's really cool. I also think that it's worth mentioning. We do get a single-sided captive pivot, which is awesome. And I definitely like the design of the clip. The placement of the jimping is thoughtful, and it also furthermore makes me believe that, again, this is a knife that was meant to be used as a knife. I think that's cool. I think that coming out with a Nessmuck blade takes guts as well, because it's not a blade shape that we're used to seeing. It's kind of like a harpoon, kind of like a drop point, kind of like a Spyderco. Yeah, I love it. The longer I hold on to this knife, the more I want one for myself. Even though I don't get to keep this one, I would love to have one in my collection, and I think that if I were to buy one, I wouldn't go with the G10. I would definitely go with the micarta, because I think that the micarta is gorgeous, and that natural patina over time would be amazing. For all of those reasons, I think that at the end of the day, you can't go wrong with this knife at all. Is it for everybody? I think that everybody should at least hold one. Don't just look at the pictures online and say, oh, I don't want something with G10. Oh, I don't want something with micarta for $300. Like, that was me. I'll own up to that. I'll own up to that. This one is good. The fit and finish on here is great. The price tag, even for all the materials and extra design language, I would still like to see this price tag somewhere around the $285 range, or possibly $275. And I think a little more input from the designer himself could go a long way as far as telling people why this knife is worth the money, because I definitely believe that it is. And if you can get one of these on sale somewhere in the holiday season for under $300, you should absolutely buy it. And for all of those reasons and more, this is getting an 8 out of 10 for fit and finish. So let's talk about what we scored this. Materials was an 8. Ergonomics was an 8. Fidget Factor was an 8. The lock was a 7. And then, of course, fit and finish was an 8. If we add up all of those, we get a grand total of 39. 39 is a very respectable score. It's at the higher end of our high recommend range, and I feel very good about this score. But let me know, do you disagree? Do you think that this knife is way overpriced at $314? Or if it were to drop subtly below the $300 range, would it then become more attainable and more attractive to you? Or do you want to go out and buy one right now? I'm going to link these down in the description below. And in the meantime, let me know. Put a comment down below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, you probably didn't watch this long anyways, so boo-hoo, there's a button for you too. And if you want to see more content just like it, make sure you hit subscribe. I'm Rollshambo. I'll catch you on the flip side.